Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Edge of Tomorrow. Episode 9. Chapter 74. I thought we were getting a shower. I asked, an eyebrow lifted in interest as Cade turned on the faucet to the bath. I had long admired the bathtub in their bathroom, but hadn't yet had the chance to use it. The jets edged into the side of the bathtub, the built-in seat meant to recline in, and the curved design that could easily fit a small family, it all called my name. After nearly a lifetime of living in cruddy apartments and decrepit houses, this place seemed like a mansion. I was used to small shower-bathtub combinations, most of the time stained an unappealing shade of yellow. More times than not, mold dotted the ceiling in black and green splotches. The times I had used their obnoxiously large shower, I took all the time in the world to enjoy the constant stream of hot water and the glistening surfaces that made me wonder how often this house was cleaned. You've been eyeing this bathtub since moving in. I thought you might finally want to use it. Cade remarked, perched on the edge of the bathtub with a look of interest on his face. Both of the twins were always so intense, and always had a predatory-like focus on me. Those first run-ins with them, it had been far too intense for me to comprehend. When they set their sights on something, they put everything they had into it, every thought, emotion, and action dedicated to that one thing. Where it had once overwhelmed me, it now heated me in a way I've been eyeing it, because who has a bathtub like this? I laughed, gesturing to the miniature swimming pool before me. 5 normal-sized people could fit in here easily. Are Alec and I not what you would call normal-sized? Cade snorted, one of his dark eyebrows lifting. Where Alec's touch reminded me of crashing waves, Cade's was the touch of flame. I drowned in the ocean that was Alec, ripped down into the cold depths of the ocean, battered by the thrashing waves that held me down. I was burned in the billowing flames that made up Cade, and could feel the heat crackle up my spine, filling every crevice with delicious warmth. They were 2 halves of a whole, both of which fit me completely. I smirked at the intrigued expression on his face, letting it fall to the floor in a clump of black fabric. You and I both know, there's nothing normal about the size of you two. Last time I checked, most 18-year-olds aren't built like linebackers. Are you talking about our bodies, or something else? He teased, a tone that was amusing considering the deepness of Cade's voice. A dark flame flickered behind those eyes, and his gaze seemed to narrow to my exposed chest. The cold air in the bathroom made me harden into peaks, a sight Cade devoured with lavish interest. Despite the blush that stained my cheeks, I managed a weak smirk in his direction. I'm talking about your body. I scoffed, as for your other part, I don't have anyone else to compare with, other than Alec. Good. Cade all but snarled, standing from the edge of the bathtub. He stood just inches away after taking 2 big strides, and looked down at me through the dark strands of his unruly hair. He smelled of cinnamon and heat, of male musk that I prayed would become firmly embedded in my brain. It was a mouth-watering scent, only made better by mixing with Alec's. His weighted gaze traveled down my face. Despite how comfortable I felt around the twins, I couldn't shake the bouts of self-consciousness that would pass over me. They were the first of any man to see me completely exposed, yet they saw none of the flaws I did. My fingers twitched as I resisted the urge to cover myself, an action Cade noticed entirely. His eyes narrowed, and darted up to my own before his calloused hand gripped my chin. His grip wasn't hard enough to hurt me, but firm enough to capture my undivided attention. He tilted my head to the side before leaning in close. Shy little Claire. Someday you will see how delectable you truly are. His chuckle was low and raspy, a sound that made my knees wobble. It was a sound full of dark promise, one that would bring both pleasure and pain. Delectable. I breathed heavily, my eyes fluttering up to his own. Someday I'm going to have a huge ego, and it'll all be because of you and Alec. As you should. He murmured, the corners of his lips twitching into a deviously handsome smirk. I went easy on you the first few times, sweetheart. But I like to play and I'm eager to see how much you can handle. How much I can handle. I squeaked, eyes going wide as I saw an entirely new side of Cade. I had always known he was a bit darker than his brother, prone to anger that made the world tremble, but I hadn't quite expected this. My lack of experience with the opposite gender left me not quite knowing what I enjoyed, but I trusted Alec and Cade enough to show me, to teach me new things. I wanted the darkness that lingered within Cade, wanted it to claim me as its own. Every part of them, light or dark, belonged to me, just as my own demons belonged to them. The three of us were imperfect, but shared those imperfections and embraced them fully. It was a feeling of complete security, one I had never known before. There was no wondering, no worrying that they might find someone new. Full acceptance was something beautiful and rare, something very little were able to experience. With your permission, of course. He grinned, a purely indulgent, male smile that promised nothing yet everything. Oh, of course. I stammered, nodding my head a little too enthusiastically. Good girl. He chuckled, and the sound of his voice was like liquid flame shooting straight between my legs. My body awoken at the raspy praise, and I twitched as the urge to consume him completely took over. Cade noticed every reaction my body elicited and seemed to devour them all. A wide, snake-like grin formed on his face, the smile of a predator, lazy and confident. Patience, sweetheart. We haven't even started yet. Cade turned the knob on the faucet and the water spewing into the bathtub sputtered to a stop. Steam rippled and billowed off the water, coating the mirror against the far wall in a thin coating of steam. In an agonizingly slow movement, he pulled the shirt from his body and discarded his pants on the floor. Like Alec, Cade was deliciously formed with rippling muscles and dark hair along his arms and legs. His chest was smooth apart from the scars that marred his skin. Every carving into his creamy skin only added to the excitement, the attraction I felt towards him. Take off your clothes. He smirked, catching me ogling his naked body. His command snapped me out of my stupor, and while I was blushing furiously, I did not apologize. Only a fool wouldn't stare. My eyes had traced the thick muscles that ran along his thighs, down to the heavy member that hung between his legs. Much less gracefully than Cade had, I shed the rest of my clothes. A squeal left my L.P.S. when Cade scooped me up and stepped into the bath. The water was hot against my skin, but only stung for a moment before I became used to the heat. My aching muscles welcomed the hot water, and I let out a low groan. Cade gripped my H.P.S. and spun me around so that I now faced the mirror along the far wall. The hardness between his legs was pressed tightly against my bottom, and I could feel every hard ridge along his shaft. His fingers schemed up and down my sides, slowly grazing H.P.S. before plunging even lower. He took his time caressing me, and with each passing second, the ache between my legs had grown. I should have been tired, completely worn out. Not only had I trained most of the day, but I had also been taken by his brother, and was left a trembling mess when we had finished. Yet, my body craved more. It was as though it knew it had felt the heated touches of only one mate, and it craved to feel the wicked touches of the other. I want you to watch everything I do to you, understand? Yes. I gasped, one last thing. He spoke softly in my ear, you come when I say so. I swallowed thickly, just a tinge of fear surfacing in my gut. The pleasure I experienced at the hands of the twins wasn't something I could hold back. It was a torrent of flame, an unwavering tsunami, a force of nature that completely obliterated any sense of awareness I had. It wasn't something I held back, it was something that overtook me completely. I wasn't sure how I could hold something like that back, but I would try. I would try for Cade. His fingers grazed over the bundle of nerves between my legs, and I jerked in response. Quick flashes of pleasure pelted me like burning embers, making me go taut and loose all at once. Every rough pass of his fingers had me ratcheting higher, and my breaths began to come in little pants. When he slipped a finger inside of me, I nearly came undone right then and there. "Watch what I'm doing to you. See how beautiful you are? See how perfect you look when your cheeks are flushed, and those perfect L.P.S. are parted." Cade rasped in my ear, his eyes locked on my own through the mirror. "See how you responds to me." Without realizing, one of my hands. The top of my body was completely exposed from the steaming water. "That's it, sweetheart." Cade groaned, "Make yourself feel good. She can have whatever she wants." Alec finally responded, his voice low. I could hear his heavy breaths on the other end, and wondered what he had been doing while listening in on us. "She's got us wrapped around her little finger, Cade." Chapter 75. We met up with Garrett, Julian, and Alec just an hour later. Between Alec's heated glances and Cade's comforting touches, it was hard to take the situation seriously. I invited Tori to join, no longer keeping her at an arm's length. Tori acted as a bodyguard of sorts. Alec and Cade had assigned her to me shortly after the rogue incident, which I found somewhat surprising. Oddly of me, but I didn't expect Tori to be such a skilled warrior. She had fought in the battle with the rogues, but I hadn't taken the time to notice. My eyes had been only for Alec and Cade that horrible day. Every time I thought about my life in this pack, I found myself astounded. I had gone from trusting no one to finally having a family of my own. I trusted Tori, Alec, and Cade with my life. I only trusted Garrett and Julian due to their mutual agreement on keeping me alive. Both needed an heir to their packs, and unfortunately, that was me. We met up in Alec and Cade's house, using one of the many rooms I hadn't yet ventured into. This one was large and open, an office of sorts. A large table sat in the center of the room, surrounded by swiveling office chairs. A few large maps were pinned to the walls, highlighting our territory and the surrounding packs. I could now see what Garrett and Julian were talking about. Both of their lands was pinned directly under Alec and Cade's, making it impossible for them to expand their territory. I hadn't talked it over with Alec and Cade yet, but I was beginning to think of a solution for that problem. Once we took over Julian and Garrett's packs, all of the territories would be lumped together. There would be more than enough room to disperse some of the citizens and possibly expand our own territory north. Julian and Garrett were the first to arrive, both looking a little worse for wear. While Garrett and Alec were looking for more information on my abilities, Julian was looking into the rogue attack. My gut was telling me there had been something more that caused the attack. It was the first I had seen, and hopefully the last, but the scale of the attack it had been larger than I thought possible. I shuddered at the thought, wondering what an all-out war between werewolves would look like. Garrett stood against the edge of the circular table, his palms flat against the cold surface. His eyebrows were bunched together, and his L.P.S. were pressed in a thin line. Julian looked nearly the same, and even Alec had a frustrated expression on his face, which smoothed out a bit once I walked into the room. As much as I wanted to stand and feign strength, my muscles were aching bitterly. I plopped down in one of the chairs, thankful Cade sat in the one beside me. Alec didn't bother sitting, but leaned against the table to the right of me, looking like a male model with his shirt sleeves bunched at the elbows and his hair skillfully tousled. Even frustrated, he was incredibly alluring. "Well, let's get on with it then," Garrett grumbled, caring little about formalities once the twins' parents made their way into the spare room. All eyes turned to Garrett's. "I've found next to nothing, but I haven't extinguished my resources yet. I have a few friends at the high table who might be swayed to our side." "I'd say you found a little more than nothing," Alec grunted, flashing Garrett a quick glare. "It means nothing," Garrett snapped, much unlike his usual well-kept self. The heavy emotions in the room were beginning to give me a headache. Julian, Garrett, and Alec were all frustrated, but emotions weren't that simple. They were often layered, sometimes mixed with one another. While Garrett was frustrated, he was also anxious and worried. Alec's emotions mirrored Garrett's down to the last drop. Whatever they had learned, it was something to worry over. "Garrett, tell us what you know," Cade grunted, crossing his arms over his broad chest. Garrett's eyes snapped over to Cade, flickering with annoyance. It was still strange to see myself reflected in those eyes, to know that I had gotten that trait from Garrett. Any information helps. White wolves were much more prominent a couple of 100 years ago. It seems hunting them to near extinction has caused a decline in white wolves. Who would have thought? Garrett scoffed dryly. The abilities were paired into categories. Those who weren't a threat were usually allowed to live so long as they didn't rustle the waters, so to speak. There's more information about the peaceful abilities. Speaking to animals, increased knowledge, controlling nature. All seemingly non-threatening abilities. The next tier had even less information. Levitation, telekinesis, weather control. Dangerous, but not the worst of the bunch. Those wolves were either controlled, or put to death. Alec picked up where Garrett had left off, running a hand over the lower half of his face. The highest tier only had a few names, most of which made no sense except for one. "We have no proof that Claire is what they speak of," Garrett grunted, wiping the emotion from his face as though he had forgotten my strange abilities. What I felt coming from him was fear, only solidifying the fact that Garrett cared for me in some strange way. Love wasn't perfect, nor was it always healthy and pure. Whatever Garrett felt for me, it wasn't only because I was his daughter. That kind of love was selfish, but did that make it meaningless? I wasn't entirely sure. "You're right, we don't. Either way, we're not keeping this from her," Alec snapped, not bothering to hide his anger and general dislike towards Garrett. Alec turned his eyes to me, and I felt that flash of comfort settles over my weary bones. There wasn't much, but the passage talked about fire starters and something they like to call an emotional leech. An emotional leech? I scoffed, somehow managing to feel offended at the term. Sure, my abilities had to do with emotions, but to call me a leech, I wasn't sure I agreed with that. "Well, what you did during the battle was kind of what a leech does," Thalia chimed in, not at all caring about the crude term. "You sucked all those terrible emotions from everyone and gave it back to them. Hence the term, emotional leech." "Fine, you're right about that part, but that's the only time I feed off of emotions." I grunted defensively. "I'm not feeding off their emotions right now, am I? If anything, they're all beginning to give me a headache." The amount of frustration and pent-up dislike reminded me of the skittering feeling that came when an insect crawled over your skin. I continued shifting in my seat as the boiling emotions rolled across my skin, setting my teeth on edge. The only thing that took the bitter bite off of the emotions was Alec's gentle touch. His L.P.S. were tipped down, and concern radiated from his very pores. While the name is a bit crude, it somewhat fits. Alec frowned, standing from the edge of the table as he sat in one of the office chairs and pulled me into his lap. The love that emanated from him felt like being wrapped in a thick blanket, one that chased away the other harsh emotions battering my mind. Crude. Tori snorted under her breath, more like ignorant. Of course, men would criticize something they know little about. Better to just kill them all off than actually try and understand them. Not all were needlessly killed off, child. White wolves were brought into the world to help bring peace, but many were sucked into wars started by alphas. Garrett grunted, fixing Tori with a sour look. He glanced my way as he spoke these next words, bringing on a glare of my own. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. You're saying Claire's power will corrupt her? Tori scoffed, shaking her head at Garrett. Forgive me, Alpha, but you're full of shit. Even a blind person could tell she'd make a great Luna. If anyone can handle that kind of power, she can. Besides, she has me and the twins, of course. Regardless, many of the alphas at the high table will want her dead. Better safe than sorry, in their case. Garrett snarled under his breath. Then it's your job to convince your friends to join our side. Cade chimed in, his voice a deep baritone that echoed across the room. Alpha Grayson might not be on the high table anymore, but I still consider him a good friend. Perhaps he could help sway some of the others, the twins' dad mused. Then it's settled. Alec nodded, turning his gaze to Julian, who had remained silent for this entire ordeal. What did you find out regarding the rogue attack? Absolutely nothing. Julian frowned, and the tension in the room seemed to ripple tenfold. Noticing the confused expression on my face, he turned his eyes my way and continued. Typically, after a rogue attack, there will be the talk amongst the packs. Rogues rarely ever do anything quietly. I've spoken with every surrounding pack, and none have seen a single rogue. They were all concentrated on our pack, Cade muttered darkly, his eyes flickering over to where I sat on his brother's lap. This was orchestrated by someone. Have you heard the word of any of the other alphas planning something like this? I've heard nothing, not a single whisper. Julian sighed, many of my pack members have family within the rogue communities. They have suffered many losses. They remain loyal to your pack? Cade asked without caution, and Julian's face soured at the question. Of course. Where the rogues live without rules, they also lack discipline and protection. I offer them that protection, give them a safe life, one where they can find their mates and have families. None would ever betray me, that I am certain of. Julian responded icily. Speaking of which, I would appreciate my pack member back, the one I sent to retrieve Claire. I hear he's been sitting away in your dungeons. I think Justin's release should be Claire's decision, don't you? Cade remarked, the corners of his L.P.S. twitching. As much as I wanted to hold a grudge against Julian's poor decision, feeling the emotions of others gave clarity to many situations. For example, all I could feel from Julian was concern. He was worried about Justin, worried about the family that missed him. That alone was enough to force my hand, to reassure myself that I was making the right decision. Let him go. I nodded, not once breaking eye contact from Julian. Thank you, Claire. Julian nodded, his voice steady and genuine. Do something like that again, and it'll be you sitting in the dungeons, I warned, speaking with more false bravado than anything else. Cade let out a booming laugh, one that nearly made me jump. Tori's quiet chuckle was next. Even Julian's L.P.S. had twitched into a smile. The only one who remained solemn was Garrett. I was horribly tired, and the emotions flitting around the room were only making it worse. As our meeting came to an end, I was more than excited for a little one-on-one time with both of the twins. They were the brief break from the emotional barrage that pounded my mind, like the calm within the storm. Tori, it seemed, had other plans in mind. She wanted a few more hours of training, insisting I learn a few more basic combat moves. More than anything, I was thankful she didn't drag me back out to the gym. The twins had a small gym of their own in the house, one that would suit our needs just fine. As Alec and Cade sauntered into the basement gym, I found myself feeling horribly self-conscious. It wasn't a secret that I had little to no knowledge of defending myself. You'd think dealing with Frank would make me want to learn to defend myself, but I never had the resources to try that route. My self-consciousness went out the window the moment Alec and Cade added their own advice into the mix. The three of them showed me how to disarm an enemy, whether they held a gun or knife. Cade showed me a few moves I could use should anyone sneak up behind me. It was much easier training with Tori, if I were being honest. Every time the twins pressed up against me, their strong hands on my waist or arms, well, it made it hard to focus on what they were saying. An hour turned into 3, and I was practically swaying on my feet by the time we finished. The sun had set in the sky, and night now reigned. I watched from the living room window as Tori jogged down the street and over to her house. Before I could get a word in, I was scooped into a familiar set of arms. Looks like someone's had a long day. Alec chuckled, letting out a low growl as I nuzzled my face into the crook of his neck. A heavy shudder seemed to work its way up his spine, and his fingers tightened around my waist. Think we should mention it to her now? Cade's voice sounded distant. I tried my hardest to listen, but my eyelids were so heavy. My entire body felt made of lead, and I cherished the weightless bliss of being held in Alec's arms. They'll expect us to be marked when we arrive. Not right now. Something tells me she's not listening anyway. Alec chuckled, brushing some sweat-coated hair from my forehead. It's going to be harder for her, having 2 mates. One alpha's mark is bad enough. If anyone can handle it, Claire can, Cade grumbled sincerely. While I picked up every word, my sleep-infested brain thought them useless and chucked them aside. I didn't feel the plush bed beneath my back as I was set down, nor did I feel them pulling my socks and shoes off. I did, however, feel comfort wash over my every aching muscle when the two of them slipped into bed beside me. Chapter 76. The following week was a painful orchestra of sore muscles, lingering headaches, loads of sweat, and those horrible protein shakes Tori insisted on making. If I had to taste another one of those disgusting shakes, I might very well explode. Tori had been right though, they were good for my body, no matter how much my taste buds revolted. A week of strenuous training hadn't turned me into a cold-blooded warrior, but I could at least somewhat defend myself. I would most likely balk when it came to fighting another werewolf, but I was confident I could handle a regular human with ease. Shifting had sped up my body's natural processes, giving me faster results than a human would normally see. While I wasn't coated in thick bands of muscle, my thin frame had filled out more. My stomach had hardened, giving the hint of muscles beneath my pasty skin. My legs, which had once been feather-thin, were now firm. Alec and Cade seemed enamored with the changes on the lower half of my body, meaning my legs and bottom. Both took every spare moment they could to appreciate the changes, and while I feigned annoyance at the constant smacks and pinches, I secretly held them dear. The only consolation was those precious moments I managed to snag with the twins. Those were the reprieve in between the strenuous training, and constant aching muscles. Garrett had gotten word from his friends at the high table, most of which were most interested in meeting me. I wouldn't fool myself into thinking anything of it. If anything, I felt like some kind of spectacle, like a wild animal that must be deemed fit to coexist in society, or else it would be put down. The thought infuriated both Thalia and I, who insisted she was less wild animal and more graceful beast. Garrett hadn't found anything further on the whole emotional leech topic. His friends at the high table, which I was beginning to believe weren't friends at all, wanted to meet me before searching their archives for the information. If my abilities were truly as deadly as they seemed, I had a strong inkling many of the alphas would vote against my life. It was almost funny, in a sad and sadistic way. A group of middle-aged men would gather to vote on my life. My life? Even as that twinge of anxiety continued to grow in my gut, I trusted Alec and Cade implicitly. They insisted killing an alpha's mate was forbidden, but both doubted that would hold the high table alphas back. Regardless, we had 3 packs fighting for me. That afforded me a great deal of comfort, when I wasn't worrying over the lives lost in my name. As the weekend drew near, that twinge in my gut continued to grow. I had this last weekend, these 2 days would be the last of the life I had grown accustomed to. Come Monday, everything would change. Either I would somehow manage to earn my life, or there would be war. It was a far cry from where I had been months ago, living under the thumb of Melissa and Frank. I wanted nothing more than to escape, to forge my own connections and build a life of my own. I had everything I ever wanted and then some. We were all set to leave Monday. Where? I couldn't bring myself to ask. Garrett, Julian, Alec, Cade, the twins' parents, and even Tori were coming. I knew we were bringing along a number of warriors, and wondered how we'd transport everyone. I couldn't imagine all of us boarding a flight like normal people. While I was nervous about Monday rolling around, it wasn't the only thing I had on my plate. This Sunday, the twins were holding a ceremony. The ceremony would officially name me Luna of their pack. I was frightful of the responsibility, but their words of encouragement helped still that fear. I wasn't sure if I were Luna material. Regardless, I would face my fear this time. I was proud to say that running was no longer an option in my mind, only a cowardly escape. As I slipped on my workout outfit Friday morning, Alec and Cade stepped into the bedroom. They had been leaving early in the morning, getting everything set for us to leave Monday. I had expected to see Tori, who insisted on arriving at the crack of dawn. The 2 of them looked incredible, wearing clothes that somewhat matched but also held little differences that showcased their own personalities. Cade wore a dark leather jacket, a white t-shirt and a pair of torn jeans. He frequently wore a pair of thick combat books, looking exactly like some kind of jacked motorcyclist. Alec dressed a bit more professional, wearing a button-down shirt that he kept rolled up to his elbows. Both had gotten their hair trimmed a week ago, in a near-identical style. Shaved short on the sides and longer on the top. Cade's hair seemed to grow like a weed, and those long strands now tickled just above his eyebrow. "Are you 2 joining me for training today?" I asked, quirking an eyebrow at the 2 of them. I crossed my arms over my chest. I was feeling particularly catty this morning, and smirked at the 2 jaw-dropping twins that stood in the bedroom. "I could show you what I've learned. If I beat you both, does that mean I get the title of Alpha?" My bait worked, though not as intended. Alec and Cade locked eyes for the briefest of moments. Cade snickered and flashed me a sinful grin, while Alec tutted and shook his head. My reflexes had gotten faster since training with Tori, and I managed to react as Alec lunged for me. I darted to the side, clipping into the dresser as he tumbled onto the bed. I let out an embarrassing cackle as he rolled across the bed and onto the floor, taking a few pillows with him. My laugh turned into a throaty yelp as Cade wrapped his arms around my torso and flipped me over his shoulder. I was thrown onto the bed like a sack of flour. Before I could even think of my next move, Alec leaped on top of me. His knees were on either side of my hips, and he pinned my hands above my head with an amused grin. I thrashed in his grip when he leaned forward, letting the longer strands of his hair tickle my nose. My heart thundered and the sparks that danced along my skin felt very similar to an adrenaline rush. "Someone's feisty this morning," Alec cooed, his head tilting to the side. "Perhaps our little mate doesn't deserve her gift." "What do you think, brother?" Speak for yourself." "I like them feisty," Cade murmured, his arms crossed over his broad chest. Butterflies swarmed in my stomach as he gave me a quick wink, running his lower lip in between his teeth. "I think Alec likes them feisty too," I cooed back, moving my hips in a way that grazed against the hardness between his legs. "That is because of you, D0LL, Alec smirked, leaning close. I could smell the remnants of toothpaste on his breath, cold and minty. It had my mouth watering without cause. My tongue darted over my dry L.P.S., and Alec tracked the movement with darkened eyes. "If you don't stop that, you certainly won't get your gift." "Does my gift include the two of you?" I asked boldly, even though my face flushed an irritating shade of red. Cade's deep chuckle danced down my spine in a sea of tingles, spreading to my legs and far between. I had no complaints about skipping my workout with Tori and having a different sort of workout with the twins. So insatiable. Alec purred, looking towards his brother, whose heavy gaze was set on the rapid rise and fall of my chest. "Been eager to get the two of us alone, sweetheart," Cade remarked, his eyes flashing with what I hoped was dark excitement. "Are you sure you can handle us both?" All of the air rushed from my lungs when one of Alec's hands drifted lower, delving in the waistband of my leggings. My legs trembled as his knuckle drifted over the thin pair of underwear I wore before brushing them aside. His finger grazed over my core before slipping from my pants entirely. I was left with a painful throb between my legs and the bitter tinge of temptation and disappointment. "She's more than excited to try," Alec mused, eyeing the wetness on his fingers before popping one in his mouth. His eyes closed and a low growl sounded from his L.P.S. as he licked the wetness from his fingers. The reaction my body had was instant, and I swore I had never seen anything hotter than that. Alec leaned forward, his L.P.S. inched from my own before smirking softly. "As much as we'd love to spend the day ravaging you, if we don't leave now, we won't make it until late tonight." That certainly grabbed my attention, taking some of the burning lust from my eyes and replacing it with confusion. "What? Are we going somewhere?" I asked, my eyes darting between Alec and Cade. I had to give it to the two of them, neither gave anything away. Both looked at me blankly, though their L.P.S. twitched into identical smiles that made my heart throb. "You didn't think your gift was here, did you?" Alec chuckled, releasing his hold on me and standing from the bed. I took his outstretched hand and sighed blissfully as I was swept into his embrace. His L.P.S. found mine feverishly, his tongue delving in to stroke my own. He tasted of mint and fresh water, his scent purely male and equally intoxicating. My head swam as his teeth grazed over the plumpness of my lower lip. I was still somewhat dazed when Cade took his turn, wrapping those thick arms around my body tightly. I was enveloped in his warmth and devoured by those plush L.P.S. Where Alec met my nibbles and licks, Cade took complete control. He battled my tongue for dominance and won every time. Kissing them was like drowning, though I had never been this happy to drown in my life. Don't worry, we'll have plenty of time to devour you once we get there. Cade hummed against my L.P.S., giving my waist a rough squeeze. I was still in a partially lust-induced haze when I followed Alec and Cade to one of the many cars sitting in their driveway. I smiled softly as Alec held open the passenger door for me, and swatted my hands away as he buckled my seatbelt. I was beginning to notice little things about the twins, how they enjoyed doing the simplest tasks for me. They would bring me dinner before themselves, draw baths for me, and even gather my dirty clothes for the wash. They noticed the small things themselves, like how I loved the feeling of fresh sheets beneath my skin. There hadn't been a single night where the sheets weren't freshly cleaned. Even if it were their housekeepers doing the washing, it was at the request of Alec and Cade. I thought about the two of them the entire drive, and lost count of how long we had been on the road. We stopped a few times for bathroom breaks, and I couldn't help but laugh when Alec came out of the gas station with a few bags full of random snacks. I was near shaking with excitement when Alec whipped out a blindfold and tied it behind my head. They had promised we were nearly there, but neither wanted to ruin the surprise. I could hear the heavy crunch of loose gravel beneath the tires of the sedan, and nearly toppled over as I leaped from the car. "Slow down, D0LL, Alec laughed, steadying me with his rough hands. The sound was intoxicating, echoing around us. It was a laugh free of the weight we had all been experiencing this past week. As my sight was blocked by the scratchy fabric of the blindfold, my other senses worked in overtime. I could smell the damp earth and fresh water, could smell the sweet sap that came from many of the trees in town. Birds chattering rang out through the air, and I knew we were in a forest of sorts. "Where are we?" I gasped as Cade pulled the blindfold from my head. We stood out front of a huge cabin. The wood on the outside was somewhat red in color, and large floor-to-ceiling windows gave me a glimpse at the luxurious inside of the cabin. A large wrap-around porch clung to the outside of the house, overlooking a long dock, and a crystal-clear lake. Trees surrounded us and the cabin, filling the air with the sweet scent of sap and pine. My eyes devoured the sights, taking in every single detail around me. The twins remained silent the entire time, letting me absorb everything. When I turned to face the twins, their cheeks were stained pink and their faces held identical looks of nervousness and hope. "It's only until Monday, but we figured you could use a break." Alec broke the silence, his hand toying with the hair on the back of his neck. The sheepish expression on his face made my heart clench. I ruthlessly charged at the twins and threw myself into their arms, smiling so hard that my face ached. "It's perfect, I absolutely love it." I laughed, and both looked relieved and elated at my joy. The smile on my face faltered for just a moment. "I don't have any clothes with me though." "Not to worry, sweetheart." Cade grinned, an expression I knew meant trouble. "We took the liberty of packing your clothes for you." Alec chimed in, his eyes darting over to Cade's as a smirk formed on his face. Chapter 77. The inside of the cabin matched the outside. It looked as though it had been plucked from one of those home improvement TV shows Tori loved to watch. Judging from the kitchen with its stacked ovens, touch-screen refrigerator, and mini bar area, it was most certainly a luxury cabin. The interior held earthy tones, mostly browns, and a few different shades of red. The sectional in the center of the cabin was big enough for an entire family, and the flat-screen mountain to the far wall was the biggest I had ever seen. Plush pillows sat on the sectional, and I resisted the urge to throw myself onto them, happy to sink into the soft material. I ogled at the brick fireplace and the hand-carved mantel that sat above it, grinning when I spotted a few framed pictures of the twins and their parents. They looked like the picture-perfect family, and for once, there was no twinge of pain in my chest. I was happy the twins had this incredible life, that they were surrounded with people who loved and respected them. Just because I had a crappy upbringing, doesn't mean I wished it on anyone else. Alec and Cade stood in front of their parents, shit-eating grins on their faces, which made me wonder what they had previously gotten into before taking the photographs. Their parents shared a look in one photo, a look that told me they knew exactly what Alec and Cade had gotten into. It was silly and kind of cheesy, but cheesy in a way that makes it more sentimental. Alec cleared his throat, and when I turned around, the two of them were just a few feet away. Both were frowning as they caught me looking at their family photos. We can never understand what you went through, living with Melissa and Frank, but you'll never have to experience that again. You'll never have to want for anything, and you'll never have to live in a shithole like that again. Whatever you need, you'll have it. Cade continued, a look of equal sincerity on his rugged face. It was incredibly alluring, to have two strong men with a soft spot for me. Only I got to see them like this, vulnerable and intimate. In their emotions, I could taste the sharp tang of guilt and knew they both punished themselves for the way I was treated. I couldn't place a single ounce of blame on their shoulders. I had kept my treatment a secret, thinking there was no one to help, no one that cared. I even kept the whole Grace ordeal a secret. I hadn't a clue what secret world lived beneath my own, and if anything I regretted not speaking up sooner. Their whirlpool of emotions had tears springing to my eyes, which I furiously blinked back. I had never been a fan of crying in front of others, no matter how comfortable I was with said person. Crying it made you vulnerable in a way that made me uncomfortable. Mistaking my sudden rush of tears, the twins shifted on their feet. I let out a garbled chuckle. The two of them, they didn't know how to handle a crying female, it made them anxious. Two towering warriors, brought to their knees over their emotional mate. Don't cry, sweetheart. Cade grumbled, his dark brows knitted tightly together. I stepped into their arms, a hidden smile on my face as I stole their warmth and sense. We didn't mean to upset you. Alec chimed in, his rough hand brushing the stray hairs back from my face. You didn't upset me. I giggled, quickly swiping at the stray tear that managed to escape my eye. Once I was sure all traces of tears were gone from my gaze, I looked up at the two of my beautiful mates. I'm just really lucky to have you both. I don't want you blaming yourselves. None of it is your fault. I kept it a secret because I didn't think anyone could help. We could have told you the truth, doll. Alec shook his head, his lips set in determination that only made me pull him closer. We could have told you the truth and put a stop to it all. If you had told me the truth, I still would have run. Especially if you pressured me into going with you both. I told the two of them honestly, I wasn't ready for the truth. I think Garrett did me a favor by telling me. I needed to decide what I wanted for myself, and the two of you let me do that. You gave me a choice. That's more than anyone else has ever done for me. I stayed locked in their arms until the bitter edge of their guilt faded. It would never completely vanish, that much I was certain of. A part of them, no matter how small, would always blame themselves for how I was treated. All that mattered is that I reminded them of the truth. They had no hand in my treatment, but they had a hand in my saving. The human life I had lived was wrought with danger, constantly tiptoeing around Melissa and Frank, waiting for the day Frank got the upper hand. This life, while it is just as dangerous, is beautiful. No life is perfect, but it's the flaws of the people you love who make it more authentic, who make it worth living. While I'm not opposed to keeping you in our arms all day, I think you should check out the bedroom. Alec murmured, his chuckle tickling my ear and making me shudder. The second part of your gift is in there. As I looked into his eyes, I couldn't mistake the flash of hunger that lingered in those dark orbs. That same flash was mirrored in Cade's eyes, but I knew they were being patient. Upstairs, down the hall. It's the first door on your left. Cade chimed in, giving me a gentle push. We'll have dinner ready by the time you come down. Do you two have any flaws? I snorted, stopping halfway up the stairs. Both moved a dark eyebrow in my direction, and my insides fluttered at the identical smirks that formed on their faces. Cooking and cleaning? I'm one lucky Luna. Actually, we're ordering pizza. Alec chuckled, flashing me a smile that was all teeth. We'll save the cooking for tomorrow. I'm going to have to thank your mom sometime. I snickered, poking my tongue out at the two of them. She raised the two of you right. Please, don't. Alec groaned. The twins shared an incredulous look with one another before turning back to me. She'll never let us hear the end of it. You might want to get up there, sweetheart. Your gift won't appreciate waiting so long. Cade called out, waltzing into the kitchen. As heavy confusion settled over my face, I was given no explanation other than an innocent grin, which looked quite humorous on Cade's face. I wandered down the large hallways until I found the room I was looking for. As I slipped inside the bedroom, I was met with the thick smell of cinnamon and leaves. Oh wow! I cooed, murmuring to Thalia and myself. Think we can convince them to move here? You have my vote. Thalia shrugged. Huge forest surrounding the cabin, great for running. The master bedroom was a huge rectangular room with maroon walls and dark hardwood floors. The four-poster bed sat on a raised platform with a few stairs leading up the side. Black silken sheets and pillowcases along with a furry comforter. I knew that once I curled up in that bed, I'd be out within moments. Thankfully, the bed was larger than most, and I knew the three of us would fit just fine. Underneath the bed was a plush, shag carpet. Against the far wall was a fully stocked bar, countless decanters sat with crystal tops. An identical fireplace jutted out of the other wall, this one free of family photos and knickknacks. Along the left-hand wall were a set of double doors, which I learned led to an equally immaculate bathroom. I wandered over to the last door in the bedroom, pulling it open to stare into a walk-in closet. The closet was bigger than my bedroom at Melissa and Frank's, fully stocked with both men's and women's clothing. As I trailed my fingers along the hangers that spanned the closet, I stiffened when something rustled behind me. Despite training for an entire week, I had yet to actually use what I had learned. I'm embarrassed to say, I failed this test. A pair of hands grabbed at my shoulders from behind, and I whirled with an open mouth, to face Tori. The horror movie scream that left my mouth was one that I'd always remember, one that would bring a horrible blush to my face. It's not that I didn't know how to defend myself, but I'm not some trained warrior. I don't have finely tuned instincts that tell me to attack first and ask questions later. Besides, who really expects to get attacked in a walk-in closet? Not me, for sure. My hand flew up to my chest as my stomach tickled with surprise. I had always hated the feeling you get when someone jumps out at you. Too many run-ins with Frank to find the feeling amusing, but I didn't blame Tori for that. What, Claire? Tori shouted, her hands raised in exasperation. Her face was a bit pink, and her fiery hair was falling out of the ponytail she had it in. Her green and brown flecked eyes were wide as my ear-splitting scream came to a warbled halt. Don't what me? I snapped back, still heaving from the scare. You're the one who jumped out at me. What did you expect? I expected you to use your training. You never know when someone might try to attack you. Tori groaned, a hand against her forehead. The severity of her expression quickly morphed into amusement as she threw her head back and cackled like a wench. I guess you can just scream at them. Hell, that would make any warrior hesitate for a moment. With that scream, you could star in a horror movie. Shit, I'd watch it. Is this supposed to be my surprise? I demanded when Alec and Cade sauntered into the room. Neither one looked surprised at my outburst, though their lips twitched as they fought back a smirk. I pinched the bridge of my nose as I looked at the three of them. While I appreciated them trying to hide their amusement, I could feel their emotions. Alec was near bursting with laughter, while Cade was a bit more skilled at hiding his emotions. Neither one felt any fear at my sudden scream, which led me to believe that Tori was my surprise after all. Apart from training, we've hardly had any time to just hang out. She shrugged, stepping out of the closet before I could think better and lock her in. She flashed a narrow-eyed look at the twins and crossed her arms over her chest. I didn't think it would take you two so long to send her up here. I got so bored, I was about to start trying on clothes. Were you having a threesome or something? Don't answer that. I snapped, just as Alec opened his mouth to speak. Are you angry with us, doll? He asked instead, giving into the temptation and letting his lips morph into an amused grin. No, I huffed, my eyes darting over to Tori. Did you really have to jump out at me? I wanted to see how fast your reflexes were. She shrugged, as though it were a plausible response. It seems her reflexes are quite fast. At least, her voice is. Cade commented, and I swear, my eye began to twitch. With more training, her first reaction will not be to scream. She's got a set of lungs on her, doesn't she? Tori snickered, making Alec's grin widen. All right, enough of that. I grunted, where's that food you two were talking about? Half an hour later, the three of us were slumped on the sectional in the living room, eating our weight in pizza. Some reality television show played quietly in the background, ignored by the four of us. The two glass doors that led to the pool out back were open, sending in a warm summer breeze that smelled of fresh water, earth, and sweet flowers. I still wasn't used to the endless abyss that was now in my stomach. 5 slices in and I was still eyeing the pizza hungrily. Alec and Cade each ordered 2 pizzas for themselves, loaded with toppings that both looked appealing and somewhat gross. Tori and I each had our own pizza, which was proving to be just the right amount. Bet you $20, they won't eat 2 whole pizzas, I whispered to Tori, munching on a slice of my own. Tori paused for a moment, watching the two of them with calculating eyes. I think they'll eat 2 and then ask us for some of ours. She snickered quietly, male werewolves are insatiable when it comes to food. Alec and Cade's eyes darted over to me once Tori finished speaking, and I felt a heated blush settle on my face. Clearly, they heard the two of us. It was the mention of S*X that captured their male attention, typical. Such alpha males. I cooed, teasingly. You're lucky we're giving you the day with Tori, Cade grunted, sharing a look of begrudging approval with Alec. If not, we'd keep you locked in that bedroom all day. That sounds horrible. Tori scolded, glaring at the twins. While copious amounts of S*X with the twins sounded incredible, I did want to explore the lake and surrounding forest. Where I had thought Tori was on my side, when she opened her mouth to continue, my jaw went a little slack. Why would you only have S*X in the bedroom? There's a whole lake out there, and a pool out back. Plus, there's a huge forest around us. Give her some variety. You're not helping, I muttered. Even with my feigned embarrassment, I couldn't deny the rush of warmth that blistered inside of me as I felt the twins' unrelenting desire. These two, they never seemed to tire of me. Every person in my life had been temporary, either because Melissa forced us to move or because I was always that friend stuck in the background. I used to hate that about myself, that I was so ordinary that no one found me special. Over the years, I simply accepted it. I didn't need to be first in anyone's eyes, I was first in my own. Having Alec and Cade, even Tori, it was a feeling I had never experienced before. I wasn't shoved to the background, forgotten about until last minute. Aren't I, though? She giggled, waggling her eyebrows at me. You seem pretty invested in my life, Tori. I remarked, lifting my eyebrow at her. A look of mock surprise fell on her face, and she pressed a hand against her chest. Oh, Claire! You've exposed me. Now we can all be mates. She cooed, falling back into the cushions of the couch with a wicked grin. Hey, my life is non-existent. You have two mates too. A girl's gotta live vicariously when she can. Alec and Cade exchanged equal looks of confusion and something similar to surprise. The look said, are all girls like this? Regardless, it was enough for Tori and I to collapse into a fit of laughter. Two muscular alphas, both overwhelmed by a couple of girls. All right, all right. Tori took a few deep breaths as her cackling ceased. She flashed Alec and Cade a cheeky grin before continuing. We should go swimming after this. Lake or pool? It wasn't a hard decision. The sun was still shining, as it was only the middle of the day. There would be plenty of time tonight to swim in the temperature-controlled pool. Tori had been little more than excited over the color-changing lights and man-made waterfall that poured into the glassy surface of the pool. Lake, definitely the lake. I nodded, and judging from Tori's widening grin, we were on the same page. Then the pool tonight. You'd think werewolves wouldn't like to swim, but we actually love it. Tori chuckled, pushing herself off the couch with a hand on her full stomach. Flying on the other hand, no. There's something about being stuck in a metal box in the sky that gives me the creeps. I've never thought of it that way. I admitted, standing from the couch as well. I had spent nearly a quarter of my life completely unaware that I was a werewolf. I had never been on a plane before, but the thought of going on one wasn't frightening. Sure, it was a little strange, but practical. I knew without a doubt that we weren't flying to wherever the high table was. Alec and Cade had been completely against the idea, convinced the plane would not make it safely to the ground if I were on it. It was hard to believe that the high table would simply try to kill me off without hearing me out, but I trusted the twins to keep me safe. Are you two ready? Tori turned towards the twins, her fists on her hips as she moved an eyebrow at them. Alec was busy stuffing another slice of pizza in his mouth, while Cade was frowning at his empty box. I knew what they were going to ask before it even left their mouths, and I didn't even bother to stifle my laughter. Can we have the rest of your pizza? It was Cade who asked, surprisingly. You owe me $20. Tori snickered quietly, but the twins could easily hear this time. Both narrowed their eyes in our direction, but said nothing further. It was adorable, honestly. I loved how even though these two men were practically warriors, they were also very much human. They had their flaws and shortcomings, but they weren't things to fix or look down on. My face was beginning to ache from smiling so much, but it was a pleasant pain. The twins couldn't feel my emotions, so I hoped that my smile conveyed how truly happy I felt. Have at it. I chuckled, linking my arm in Tori's as we ventured upstairs in search of a bathing suit. The twins had left my fully packed suitcase on the bed. Tori pulled out a small duffel bag from her hidden spot in the closet and tore out an emerald green bikini. The top and bottoms had a small ruffle on them, which made them look more cute. I've always thought redheads looked amazing in green. I complimented, flashing her a grin. Honestly, I'm jealous of the whole two-eye color thing you have going on. Tori sighed, plopping down on the bed beside me. You could wear any color and it'd still look good. Or it clashes with the other eye entirely. I countered with a smirk. I was never big into fashion, but there was nothing wrong with wanting to look your best. The twins' mom had picked out most of my clothing, and I found that I loved it all. I wasn't used to the dresses and skirts, but I was willing to give them a try. As I rifled through the suitcase they had packed for me, my jaw went slack and my eyes narrowed. There wasn't a single pair of shorts in the entire suitcase, nor were there any shirts. I found a single bikini, light blue in color. The chest piece looked a bit small for my bust, and I frowned as Tori fell back on the bed and howled in laughter. They packed your suitcase for you, didn't they? She cackled, the spattering of cinnamon freckles on her cheeks rippled as she laughed. Oh, they're good, so good. I yanked the baby blue bikini from the suitcase and shoved everything else back inside. The only wearable pieces of clothing in the entire thing were a dress or two. However, there were plenty of skimpy bras and lace underwear. You're going to be so busy these next 2 days, Tori smirked. She fell back onto the bed. Oh, the life of a Luna. Chapter 78. As I stood in the mirror analyzing the skimpy bikini the twins had packed for me, I decided that I in fact liked the bathing suit. It matched the color of my left eye perfectly, even if it was a bit too small. I had never been slim in physique, and working out with Tori had only added to that fact. My waist was somewhat narrow, and my stomach had flattened more since training, but my hips flared out and my bust was larger than the average woman. The little triangles of the top managed, just barely, though. The bottoms on the other hand, they were something else. Little bows sat on either side of my hips, and the bottoms covered perhaps a quarter of my full rear. Tori came up behind me and moved her head to the side, her curly ponytail of fiery locks bounced from the movement. She pursed her lips and wrinkled her nose, those cinnamon freckles scrunching. Why can't I fill out like that? She scoffed, and I tried to contain my surprise. I wasn't used to this girl talk, that is. Tori was one of those females who accepted her body and embraced every curve, mark, and dip with incredible confidence. She embraced her fully, something I was trying to do as well. You fill out just fine. I snorted, shaking my head at her. Plus, I'm sure you can fit into a lot more clothes than I can. That's not your fault though. She retorted, placing her hands on her hips. We all know the fashion industry caters to the small, Claire. I never knew you cared so much. I teased, chuckling as she rolled her mossy eyes. Tori was a bit shorter than I, and her form was a bit less curvy. Where my chest was practically spilling from the bikini top, hers were just small mounds. I'm not shaming her or anything, all chest sizes matter. Only an I. would let something as ridiculous as breast size determine the worth of a woman. Perhaps Tori was rubbing off on me, after all. I moved my own head as I stared my reflection in the mirror, and decided once and for all that I did like this bikini on my body. As silly as it sounded, it was my first time wearing a bikini. When I was pretty young, living with my grandma, she had taken me to a community pool a few times. I had worn a simple one-piece bathing suit, as most little girls did. Never have I felt so exposed or confident. Oh, I know that look. Tori grinned widely, rubbing her hands together. Hey, they chose the bathing suit. I shrugged, not bothering to fight the smirk that formed on my face. It's only fair that I make them regret it. It was a strange feeling, smiling this much. My cheeks ached from all the grins and laughter, but it wasn't a bad feeling. It was one of those pains that reminded you that you were alive, that life was beautiful and worth living, despite the bad parts. I'm going to be seeing lots of hard-ons today, aren't I? Tori snickered, but her emotions said something a little different. I felt her amusement, and her happiness like sun-soaked petals and tanning lotion, but there was something else hidden beneath all of that. The emotion was so small that I was surprised I even felt it to begin with. Hiding beneath the amusement and happiness was just a hint of longing, and a dash of bitterness. Those two emotions were minuscule in quantity, but had me halting for just a moment. Why would I have been given this gift, if not to use it? If I could help Tori, even for a moment, then perhaps my gift wasn't so dangerous after all. Are you all right? I frowned, nearly cringing at the worry in my voice. It was a tone I had never used, one that had also never been used on me. I mean, I'm not trying to pry, but you know I can't control the whole emotion sensing thing. What? I'm fine, she replied, seemingly shocked that I asked such a thing. Everything that's going on, it's stressful and everything, but I'm not upset over it. It's not that. I feel longing coming from you, and just a tiny bit of bitterness. I cringed as I forced the words from my mouth. After all, how bad did it sound telling someone what they felt? Part of me regretted even bringing it up, but I honestly just wanted to help. That guilt faded a bit when Tori's shoulders sagged. It's nothing against you, but when I see you with your mates, I just wonder when it'll be my turn. She sighed, brushing back a ringlet that had fallen from her ponytail. She gnawed on her lower lip as she met my gaze, and I could feel the guilt that bubbled in her gut. I mean, I've been 18 for months now. That's 2 years, 2 whole years without finding my mate. If he was in our pack, I would have found out already. Is it possible he's in a different pack? Like Garrett or Julian's? I asked. I knew what mates were and knew what it felt like to find them, to be with them, but I couldn't exactly pinpoint what it felt like to finally find Alec and Cade. All I remember is that it was incredibly overwhelming, feeling that drawn to 2 people, it wasn't anything I had experienced before. Can you, sense them or anything? If only. She snorted, shifting on her feet. I assume he's in a different pack, but he could be in England for all I know. I've never even left this pack before. Maybe that's why I haven't found him yet. Well, you're coming with us to the high table meeting. That's a good a chance as any. I tried my best to reassure her when an idea came to mind. I would be Luna, right? That meant I was allowed certain freedoms, given the power to make certain decisions. With that in mind, I squared my shoulders and gave Tori a determined look. No longer did guilt taint my voice, only a surefire resolve. When I take over as Luna, we'll scour Garrett and Julian's pack for your mate. If he isn't there, then I'll make sure you have whatever you need to go and find him. My words settled over Tori, her eyes growing wide as she processed them with careful attention. It almost offended me, her surprise. She was the first friend I had made here, the first friend I had in a long time. If I had the power to help her, how could I not? I'm not an expert on being a good friend, but I'm pretty sure I'd be a crappy friend if I didn't help her find her soulmate. You'd do that for me? Give me the money to go and look for my mate. She squeaked, those emerald eyes growing watery. I'll even send a group of warriors with you. I don't know how often rogue attacks happen, but I'm not leaving anything up to chance. I pressed, not daring to risk my friend at the claws of those feral rogues. You think Alec and Cade would agree to that? She replied, hope blossoming in her face and heart. Hope wasn't an emotion I had experienced yet, and I basked in its uniqueness. Feeling emotions, they reminded me of experiences, tastes, and smells. They were all unique, all different depending on the person. Tori's hope, it felt like those times I would climb onto the roof, basking in the silence of the night. I'd stare up at the stars and think, dreaming of a life beyond the one I lived in, beyond the hateful words of Melissa and Frank. I didn't need to ponder whether or not the twins would agree with my bold decision. They would do what was best for Tori. If not because she was an amazing person and member of the pack, then because she was my friend, the first true one I had in a long time. Think we'd agree to what? Alec's voice sounded from the open bedroom door, his head sticking just a few inches into the bedroom. His onyx hair fell over the side of his head, and he brushed it back with a rough motion. Nothing. Tori chuckled, and I noticed her wiping the tears from her eyes, trying to be as covered as possible. At least, nothing you need to worry about yet. Getting into trouble already, sweetheart? Cade's voice filtered from down the hall. I snorted at his words and tried to will the blush from my face. Alec's eyes darted from Tori's glossy eyes and over to me, and it was blatantly obvious when his attention was snagged on the bathing suit I wore. His eyes lingered on my chest for longer than necessary before drifting down my torso, and lazily running the length of my legs. Everywhere his eyes touched, goosebumps lifted on my skin. I think you should have chosen a different bathing suit for her, brother. Alec cleared his throat, his eyes darting back towards my face. I distinctly noticed his hand drift lower, adjusting himself just out of Tori's sight. A few seconds passed and Cade appeared at the door, his eyes alluring and practically sucking all of my attention towards him and Alec. As bad as it sounds, Tori faded to the background and all I could see were the twins, my twins. My stomach heated under their collective gaze, that honey-like warmth dripping down between my thighs. Cade remained silent for nearly a minute, and I swore I could hear Tori snickering lightly under her breath. I regret nothing, though I do think she'll be the death of us, he grunted, giving me one last endlessly hungry look before sauntering through the bedroom and into the adjoining bathroom. I'm sure my face was ripe with confusion when the shower sounded. Alec, however, seemed to know exactly what his brother was up to. I think I'll be needing a cold shower as well, Alec mumbled, a hand rubbing at the back of his neck. I didn't miss how his shirt had risen, exposing those delicious muscles that coated his stomach, nor the tent in his sweatpants when he followed Cade into the bathroom. We'll meet you down at the pool in 5 minutes, he called out, closing the bathroom door behind him with a cheeky grin. Girl, you're going to be hurting later on. Tori shook her head, making her curls bounce like tendrils of crackling flame. I laughed in agreement, though I knew from experience that the kind of pain she was talking about was laced with more pleasure than I had ever experienced in my short life. Maybe I have 3 mates out there. She snickered as we walked down the curved staircase and towards the sliding glass doors that led out to the pool. Or 4. Can't stand odd numbers. 4 mates. I sputtered, shaking my head in disbelief. Could you imagine it? 4 insatiable men, all claimed as yours while simultaneously claiming you as theirs. No, thank you. I'll happily take my 2 mates and be on my way. It's always been a dream of mine, to have a harem of my own. Tori cooed somewhat jokingly, her hands clasped as she bounced out the back door. You've always dreamed of having a harem full of men. I snorted, moving an eyebrow at my strange friend. Not really, but I wouldn't argue if the moon goddess happened to pair me with 4 devastatingly handsome men. She countered with a wave of her hand. At this point though, I'm willing to take one without complaint. You'll find your mate, Tori. I'll do whatever I can to help. I reassured her with a smile. The pool behind the cabin was as large as the community pool my grandma had taken me to swim at. It was shaped like a large L, and had a diving board at the end. While the community pool started at a whopping 2 feet deep, this pool started at nearly 7. I placed a few towels on the wicker sectional that sat on the deck and peered down at the crystal clear water. It was incredibly humid outside, hot enough to make sweat trickle down the back of my neck. I dipped a toe in the water and nearly sighed at how cold it felt. "Oh, Luna!" Tori cooed, and I didn't bother turning around as I snorted at her. She knew she didn't have to call me Luna, but I knew she wanted something whenever she used the word. "Yes, my loyal subject," I retorted, hearing her cackle behind me. That was the last thing I had time to say as I was tackled from behind. I knew it was Tori from scent alone. She smelled of sunscreen and Granny Smith apples, a strange combination, but it reminded me of summer. My mouth was open as we tumbled into the pool, a mess of arms and legs that couldn't seem to untangle themselves. I knew she had intended to shove me in, but my faster-than-human reflexes aided me for once. I managed to clasp my hand around her wrist and send her tumbling in alongside of me. As we both resurfaced, hair a complete mess with lopsided grins on our faces, I splashed a playful wave at her face. I couldn't help but laugh as the wave brushed back the strands of red hair that clung to her cheeks and neck. As soon as our laughter ended, her mouth popped open and her eyes went wide. Her eyes darted downward for a moment before permanently plastering themselves to my face, refusing to look any lower than my forehead. Claire," she sputtered, clearly fighting laughter. "Did you hit your head or something?" I asked, an eyebrow raised. "I can't tell with all that red hair." Something bobbed on the surface of the water nearly 10 feet away. A thin scrap of sky blue cloth. My jaw unhinged as Tori snorted, a hand flying up to cover her mouth. "Seems like we came back just in time for the fun." Chapter 79. Seems like we came back just in time for the fun. It was Cade who spoke, his voice thick with both amusement and arousal. Alex stood there with a glazed look to his eyes, completely forgetting Tori was also in attendance. "Men!" Tori cooed, laughing quietly when neither of the twins seemed to register her teasing remark. She quickly dove underwater and brushed the sopping wet locks from her forehead. Both Alec and Cade seemed to need a few minutes to regain themselves. The evidence of their interest was hidden within the strained fabric of their swimming trunks. "So much for that cold shower," I laughed silently. The twins made me feel mature, like I wasn't the inexperienced girl I often felt like. They loved me as I was, and that alone would bring an incredible amount of confidence to any clear-minded woman. I drifted through the pool, my eyes locked on theirs, as I reached for my abandoned bikini top. "We're learning so much about you, sweetheart," Cade teased. "So quick to toss your clothing to the side. Remind us never to get you drunk." Neither of the twins stared at my bare chest, they took in everything as a whole. It wasn't the simple sight of BR_easts that aroused them, but the fact that those BR_easts belonged to me. It gave my thoughts a possessive edge, and filled Thalia with smooth satisfaction. "You're the ones who picked out the bikini for me. It's not my fault the top was a bit small, and I do not just my clothes off, Cade." I snorted, adding a little snark to my voice for good measure. That little attitude I showed seemed to only excite the twins more, something I found endlessly funny and alluring. Cade's eyes darkened and Alec flashed a panty-wetting smirk that made my insides flutter. I feel like we should have called her Kitten. Little thing's got hidden claws in there. Alec chuckled, moving his head to the side as he watched me put on my bikini top. If your friend weren't here, I'd say forgo the top and bottoms entirely. Cade taunted back with that husky voice of his, brushing the long strands of hair from his face in a movement that made his muscles bunch and ripple. Don't even start with the talk, alphas. Tori called out from the end of the pool. She pulled herself over the L.P. of the pool and sat down. The look she gave the twins was nothing short of murder, and I couldn't help but cackle at the sight. It wasn't a very attractive laugh, but it was one of freedom and unequivocal happiness. I hadn't felt this relaxed in my life. Free of the constant worrying that plagued me for years. I could act my age for once, and wanted to savor every moment before the mess that would soon come. Tori looked like a fiery queen on her throne, perched on the edge of the pool as she stared down my two fierce alphas. Queen of the pool, I laughed quietly. Excuse me. Alec smirked jokingly, moving an eyebrow at Tori. He had that smoldering look most unbelievably attractive men have, and I found myself utterly dazzled by him. The way his dark eyes caught the sunlight, revealing shades of milk and dark chocolate, it did something to my heart that left it a fluttering mess. If I didn't have more faith in my own self-control, I'd say that a trickle of drool ran down my chin. Oh, don't give me that look. Tori snorted, not missing a beat. She fixed Alec with a long look before continuing, that might work on your love-struck mate, but not me. You're not kicking me out of this pool so you can get all dirty with Claire. Your torment is your own faults. Tell Tori. They're not getting anything from me. I laughed, sticking a tongue out at both Alec and Cade. Cade quite literally gave me a look that made me clench my legs. So, for my own safety, I continued speaking. Well, not until later. Oh, you're just as bad as they are. She groaned, leaning forward and flopping into the pool. I was far enough away not to receive full impact of her splash, but instead felt a light spray misting my face. I turned back to Alec and Cade, who gave me identical looks of interest and amusement. Eyebrows lifted, L.P.S. twitching, and those endless eyes locked every rise and fall of my chest. We're not getting anything from you. Cade mused, then removed the shirt from his chest with a single hand. It was one fluid movement that had my eyes locked on the muscles adorning his stomach and chest. Alec followed suit, and standing near one another, they looked like twin fallen angels sent to steal me away. They had the bodies of warriors, bulky and muscular, adorned with the scars they received in battle. Alec had always been a tiny bit slimmer than Cade, who seemed to pack on muscle unlike any other person I've seen. It was such a minute difference that most people wouldn't notice it. Yet, I did. I noticed everything about the twins. I said not yet. I pleaded, but it came out as a weak question. They knew I wouldn't resist them. Hell, I couldn't even if I wanted to. The pull I felt towards them was too strong, too consuming. Feeling their emotions only added to that pull. It was hard to separate myself from the emotions around me. I could feel all of them as though they were my own, and often they did become my own. It was hard not to feel irritable when someone was in a bad mood, just as it was hard not to become furious when someone else was angry. I was slowly beginning to separate myself from the heavy emotions of others, but the twins were different. We were too closely connected, and it was proving far too hard to pull away from them magically. If I were being honest, I didn't mind it. I enjoyed knowing how they felt, and more often than not, we usually felt the same. Their happiness was my happiness, and vice versa. I wasn't able to say anything else because Cade launched himself into the pool with a speed that surprised me. I had just enough time to squeal and recoil as I was splattered with the cold water of the pool. The light scent of chlorine rang in my nose, but was mixing with the wet scent of Cade. Masculine with just a hint of rich and musky cologne. It fit his hard and quiet persona perfectly. Thick arms wrapped around my waist as Cade was plunged under water. With my hair clinging to my forehead and cheeks, I squealed when I was lifted into his arms. The air around us was humid, the water crisp and cold, and Cade's chest comfortably warm. He chased away the chill the water brought on, replacing it with something dark and carnal. That something was a promise. Attitude, sweetheart. Cade scolded, chuckling low in my ear. I shivered as I was pressed into his chest, my heart thundering almost painfully. Cade felt the chill that passed me and smirked slow. When he spoke, just a hint of his canine showed, sharp and white. You talk a big game for someone who can't even stand my touch without wetting her bathing suit. Are you sure we won't get anything from you? Alec murmured close to my ear, making me jump and nearly squeal. Did I scare you, D0LL? He had moved so quietly I hadn't heard him. Well, I'm sure I would've if I wasn't sucked into the endless abyss that was Cade. Water hardly rippled around him, completely undisturbed. It was something I hadn't actually noticed about Cade before. I had only seen him in battle once, and it wasn't an experience I cared to repeat. Had he always been this quiet, this stealthy? Have you always been this stealthy? I asked, narrowing my eyes at his face. You haven't noticed yet. Alex scoffed, a hand to his muscular chest. His L.P.S. turning into a head-spinning grin. His teeth were perfect, like his brother's, his sharp canines at the front of my attention. I'll have to try harder to be even more stealthy. Don't start sneaking up on me now. I huffed, trying to diffuse the thick tension that was clearly working its magic on the three of us. I felt Tori's flicker of emotions from somewhere in the large pool, and was happy to feel they were all positive. I had hoped my earlier promise would chase some of those heavy emotions away. I didn't blame her for those emotions, I never would. I understood why she felt the way she did, and knew there was nothing bad behind it. She simply wanted her other half, wanted it more than anything. It only made me cherish what I had with Alec and Cade even more. I knew that this bond couldn't be replicated, couldn't be fulfilled by anyone else. I just wasn't meant for one person, I was meant for two. Tori gave us a few more minutes before intervening, claiming the three of us were seconds away from tearing off our clothes and giving what I'm sure would be a very interesting performance. She was wrong, partially, but her words worked either way. I had a permanent blush etched onto my face, for what I'm sure would last the rest of the night. Make no mistake, I might have brushed up against Alec and Cade at least 50 times before I was satisfied with their dark-eyed looks and poorly concealed growls. Eventually Alec and Cade ventured into the kitchen, making Tori and I salivate with the heady scent of cooked meat, marinara, and vegetables. We were both laying poolside in one of those extremely comfortable padded sun chairs. Tori was covered in a fine layer of sunscreen, and I was pretending to work on a tan. I burned a lot, but eventually I'd grow at least 2 shades darker. I was pondering effects of werewolf healing on sunburns when Alec and Cade brought out 2 plates of food. Not only did the two of them cooked, their food was incredible. Undoubtedly a gift from their mom, who learned most of her Italian recipes from her husband's mother. Tori audibly groaned when she bit into the thick slice of garlic bread, and made an exaggerated performance by placing her hand against her chest and asking for another. I couldn't blame her, I could probably eat my weight in their food. Only when I was stuffed and happy did I shove my plate away. I reminded myself to thank their mom later and ask for some cooking lessons myself. We went back inside just as the sun began to dip behind the trees. The smell of chlorine wafted through the cabin, but I was beginning to like the scent. For the rest of my life, I would pair the memories of freedom and happiness with the gentle sting of chlorine. Settled on the couch, smushed between the twins with a bowl of popcorn on my lap, I couldn't think of anywhere I'd rather be. The blanket that was draped over the three of us, it locked in the warmth and musky smell from the twins. Alec's scent had a spicier note that fit his personality perfectly. Tori had turned into a blanket burrito, and was staring wide-eyed at the horror movie playing out on the large screen. She had gone through a bag and a half of popcorn and was still going strong. I wasn't one to judge though, the twins and I were on our fourth werewolf hunger and all. After 3 movies and laughing until my face ached, Tori ventured upstairs for bed. She was leaving in the morning, as she waited last minute to pack for the high table meeting. I couldn't blame her, I had hardly touched my suitcase or the closet full of clothing. I had a sickening feeling that this little cabin would be the last time I felt truly safe, completely untouchable. The twins and I ventured out into the pool an hour later. The humidity had grown during the day, and just a few minutes outside had sweat glistening on my face. The water was warmer than it had been, sitting under the baking sun for hours. I slipped in and sighed as the cold water lapped at my skin. The twins were next, Alec still as silent as before. For a while we swam separately, floating and basking at the stars that hung over our heads. We could never stay far from one another for long, constantly drawn back together. My back was flush against Cade's chest, and I currently held Alec's face in my hands. His L.P.S. were soft, somewhat salty from the popcorn, but it tasted delicious on his tongue. His damp hair felt like silk under my fingers, and as I tugged at his hair, he growled under his breath. Cade's hands were moving up my arms, drifting towards my shoulders. I shivered when his L.P.S. pressed against the hollow of my throat. Alec pulled away from his L.P.S., but didn't move away. The look he gave me was soft, and his emotions told me what his words couldn't. He loved me, no matter how long we had been together. It might only be a few months in a human's life, but this it was everything. The bond knew what we were to one another, and most humans never had the blessing of that experience. Cade's emotions mirrored his brother, and I hoped there would be a time that I could tell him I felt the same. They both knew, the twins. They knew that I loved them even though they couldn't feel the sweet taste of it as I did. They couldn't feel my emotions, but they knew nonetheless. There's something we've been meaning to talk about, D0LL, Cade murmured huskily as his L.P.S. continued their descent down my neck. I tried to listen to his words, but they were swimming lazily in my head as I fell back into his arms. He stopped just at the hollow of my throat, pressing his tongue against this one spot that had my legs giving out. He caught me easily, halting my slow descent into the cold waters of the pool. Those sparks I would get when I touched Alec and Cade, it ran the length of my body like bolts of lightning, all radiating from that one place on my neck. I don't think she heard a word you said, brother. Alec chuckled, his dark eyes framed by onyx lashes. Chapter 80. I don't think she heard a word you said, brother. Alec chuckled, his dark eyes framed by onyx lashes. Cade halted his assault on my neck, and even chuckled at the frustrated groan that left my lips. If only we never had to leave this place. I'd dedicate my days learning everything I could about Alec and Cade, the things they love and fear, their mannerisms and private thoughts. Our nights would be spent by learning each other physically. Life, however, never stopped moving for anyone. I don't like the sound of that. I muttered, my toes grazing the smooth surface of the pool as I floated, trying to keep my head above the water. I wrapped my arms around Alex's neck, and felt Cade move up behind me. I think we should just go back to what we were doing. Now that, I'm sure would end amazingly. Not to worry, we'll get back to that after our conversation. Alex smirked down at me, tapping the tip of my nose with a damp finger. As fast as his smirk had appeared, it vanished even faster. I swallowed thickly, hating when the twins grew serious. It seemed there was far too much to be serious about lately. We've waited quite a bit to have this conversation. The last thing we want to do is rush you, and this is not how we wanted it to happen, but there are certain things that must be done before going to the high table meeting. Cade murmured from behind me, his hands settling on my waist. His strong grip kept me from bobbing on my toes, and kept my head firmly planted above the watery surface. Believe us, we hate being forced into things. You deserve all of the time in the world to figure out what you want. This world is still so new to you, and you need to know the full extent of what is expected. Having S*X is only the first part of completing the mate bond. Our scents merge and basically let all unmated wolves know that we're taken. Alec continued where his brother left off, just another tidbit of proof that they were often one person separated into two. Marking, that's the final piece. Typically, there's only two mates in question, so things will be a bit different this time. Marking? Tori mentioned something about that. I replied thoughtfully. What is it exactly? I hadn't asked Tori to elaborate, and was beginning to regret it. The twins were clearly nervous about this topic of conversation, which only made me more determined to put their minds at ease. They knew I was all in, but my lack of experience in this world frightened them. The two of us would bite you, typically on your neck. The wound would be non-fatal, and would heal into a mark unique to the individual. You would do the same to us, and leave a mark of your own. Cade chimed in, running his fingers down the length of my neck. When he got to one spot in particular, my eyes nearly rolled in the back of my head. A rush of molten pleasure trickled down my spine, making my legs grow weak. When he spoke again, his voice was deliciously low and husky. This would be the spot I'd mark you, where the entire world would see who you belong to. I'd have to bite you too as well? I asked. A part of me was a bit frightened, but my own curiosity outweighed my fear. I was a werewolf, like it or not. These customs were my own, and I was long past running from myself. The entire world would know that you're mine. The world already knows we're yours, doll. Alec chuckled, brushing the hair back from my face with a gentle hand. But the answer to your question is yes, they would. His eyes were unbearably soft, and the white moonlight brought out the cacophony of brown tones in his eyes. I don't see why you were both so worried to tell me. I spoke with a small laugh. I want to tie myself to both of you in every way possible. We were worried because there's more to the marking that we've mentioned. It solidifies the bond between us, sweetheart. If you were to leave us, or be killed, well, the two of us wouldn't live for much longer. Cade murmured softly, a sound that was unusual for him. Cade was the harder of the two, the one who kept his emotions and thoughts well hidden behind dark, endless eyes. Vulnerability wasn't in his skill set, but he managed for me. You would be able to mind us directly, and not only would you feel our emotions, but we would feel yours as well. Now that was a little daunting. Then again, I knew without a doubt that my life would never be the same if the twins weren't in it. Even though I wouldn't physically die without them right now, a part of me would wither away if I left them. In a way, it made perfect sense. They both held a piece of my soul, one I had been missing for so long. Why would I want to continue a life where they weren't present, forever missing them with every inch of my fractured soul? It was a life I wasn't interested in living. So, the tides will have turned. I mustered up a smirk. Now you'll be able to tell what I'm feeling instead of the other way around, and read my thoughts, when I allow it. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going on in that pretty little head of yours. Alec grinned, running his thumb along my lower lip. My tongue darted out and grazed against his finger, and I relished the physical reaction it had on him. His eyes darkened and tracked the movement with a predatory focus, and his emotions changed like a switch had been flipped. I want to know what goes on in your head, both of you. I countered with a smug grin, all your secret thoughts there for me to see. Nothing will be kept secret from you, sweetheart. Cade chuckled. I could feel him stiffen against my backside. But can you handle sharing your secrets with us? All of those dirty thoughts of yours there for us to see. That doesn't sound so bad. I managed to stammer, my heart a frantic patter in my chest. We're getting off topic, brother. Alex scolded Cade, though there was little animosity in the action. You're right, as usual. Cade grumbled, but made no action to remove his hardened length from my backside. We want you to mark us, doll, but not without you knowing fully what you're getting into. Alec continued, a small smile gracing his strong face. We will mark you tomorrow night, as there's a high chance you'll pass out. It won't hurt much, but the emotions can be overwhelming, from what we hear. We assume that 2 marks will mean twice the sensation. I once would have been afraid of the pain, but that ship had long sailed. I've experienced so much pain at the hands of Frank and Melissa, both physical and emotional. This kind of pain, for the twins, was well worth it. I would endure so much for them without ever losing the smile on my face. For you too, I can handle it. I told them both softly, letting all my sincerity flow into my voice. I know what I'm getting into, and I'm already too far in to stop now. My life it would never be the same without the 2 of you. I'd never be happy, eternally restless and miserable. I'm tired of being unhappy. If being with you 2 means accepting danger and responsibility, then I'm here for it all. The relief and happiness that blossomed within them was sweet to the taste, and echoed within my own heart. Call Thalia forward, sweetheart. She'll know what to do, and will help you with the rest. Cade spoke softly in my ear, nudging me towards Alec. I did as he said and felt Thalia's immediate response. She was both relieved and absolutely thrilled. It was in her nature to mark and mate, to seal the bond and produce pups. I wasn't quite ready for the pups yet, but that could come in time. You'll know where to bite. Thalia told me, unable to conceal her own excitement from her voice. Just a little nip, nothing serious. Alec moved his head to the side as I drifted forward. I placed my hands on his shoulders to keep from bobbing in the water. His neck tasted lightly of chlorine, but mostly of his own spicy scent. His hands gripped my arms tightly, and I could feel his Adam's apple twitch within his throat. My lips trailed over his smooth skin, seeking out the spot where my mark would sit. Thalia had been right, I knew where to bite without much hassle. The junction where his neck and shoulder met, that was where I wanted my mark. There wasn't much of a reaction until my teeth finally broke through his skin, and warm blood rushed into my mouth. The taste of blood, it wasn't a pleasant taste. This was somewhat different though. It was Alec's blood I were tasting, and it felt as though I had touched a live wire. Alec gasped and his arms tightened against my body, flattening me to his chest. I could feel it then, that final piece snapping into place. That long-missed piece of my soul finally coming home. My ability to feel others' emotions felt like a one-way connection, like I was eavesdropping on something private. It was completely different. No longer was I some kind of voyeur, but it was now a willing connection. An open channel between Alec and I. I knew when enough was enough and pulled my elongated teeth from his neck, licking the droplets of blood from his pale skin. The wound was already beginning to heal, and I could see the start of what must have been my mark on his skin. Alec was right about the experience being a bit overwhelming. I wasn't even marked yet and all I could think about were my mates. Touching them, tasting them, letting them fill and use me until my throat and private bits were sore. Love, lust, desire, longing, and familiarity. They all battled for dominance in my mind until the urge to touch the twins was near overwhelming. My fingers twitched and my core throbbed, sweat even trickled down my back. I was spun around so fast that my head spun, and met Cade's eager eyes. He was excited, and just a tad bit impatient. He wanted his turn, he wanted to be claimed and marked by his mate. So that's how we make you feel. Alec chuckled darkly, brushing the hair from my neck and scraping his teeth against my soft skin. His voice had changed, turning into something dark and carnal. We make you feel flustered and overheated. How unbearable that must be. Mark me, sweetheart. Let everyone know that we are yours. Cade murmured as Alec tore the bathing suit bottoms from my body and shoved a finger into my drenched core. Alec and I, we were both drowning in the connection between us, and I wanted nothing more than to bring Cade into the mix. She's so tight, Alec muttered to himself, his dark hair clinging to his neck and forehead. When he looked up at his brother, his eyes were dark and half-crazed with lust. Mark him, so that he can join us. Easier said than done, I thought through the pleasure-filled haze that fell over my mind. Alec chucked my bathing suit bottoms out of the pool, and they landed with a wet plop on the cement. My entire body went stiff when his thumb grazed against the sensitive bundle of nerves between my legs, and I couldn't help but throw my head back and moan. Cade gripped my hips, keeping me upright in the water as his brother pressed the head of his length against my opening. There was no hesitation on either end when Alec slid the entirety of his length inside of me, stretching me to the point where it nearly hurt. That twinge of pain was followed by the incredible feeling of being full, dominated by one of the two men I loved. Alec pushed the two of us against the wall of the pool, smushing me in between them both. It was Cade who kept me standing when Alec moaned in bliss and thrust against me. I wanted them both filling me until I couldn't tell where I began and they ended. I wanted to be close to them in the most carnal of ways. Humans were animals after all, and werewolves, well, we were more animalistic than the rest of them. My teeth elongated on their own, and I sought out that perfect spot on Cade's neck. Cade's initial reaction wasn't as physical as his brother's, but even the mighty Cade succumbed to the intense wash of emotions that flooded his system. No longer was I eavesdropping on their emotions, an unwelcome visitor forced to watch. Now we were all connected, closer than we had ever been. As my teeth pierced Cade's skin, his head fell back and his mouth opened. There was something beautiful about seeing two brutal men completely unhinged and vulnerable beneath me. His emotions grew stronger within me, and I could feel him picking up on my own. I love you, Cade, I told him through my thoughts, that bonded us all together. I love you, so much. Both of you. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.